Keeping myself on mute, jamming out with Dr. Dre and Tupac, man. Peace, 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 everybody. Is the guy with the bow tie checking in with you live for another edition of Business with Benefits. To my right, you will see the wonderful Daisy Garcia. Let me get you off mute there, Daisy. Hey, Daisy, how you doing?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
No problem. You're in California. I'm in Georgia, so we got to get some California love going on here for the West Coast.
I love it.
Well, I want to say thank you to #Team Live, #Team Replay. However you consume the content, we do appreciate it. Please let us know below where you're watching from and how you're watching. We got YouTube in the house and LinkedIn. So Daisy and I, Daisy's my boss, quote unquote, right now. So Daisy is a client of mine. So I answer to her. And she has an interesting business that I've been wanting to talk about with for a while, just because I think it's relevant for the market we're in right now. So Daisy, for the people that have not seen ImagineCRM and the wonderful stuff you guys do, let them know who you are and your purpose here on the earth.
Thank you. So my name is Daisy Garcia. I'm the founder and CEO of ImagineCRM. We are a consulting Salesforce.org and .com consulting partner, and we service nonprofits and foundations with Salesforce technology solutions. So we help build Salesforce solutions to help engage in their processes from beginning to end and implement them, hold a hand, and develop processes and procedures for them to do their day-to-day operations.
Now, before we started, you and I were talking briefly about this, that before I met you, I did not think about Salesforce for a nonprofit. It was not a thought I ever had. And I've been in sales for a long time, but just never thought about it for nonprofit. So what kind of made you decide to focus on that side for a nonprofit?
So I have over 15 years of technology experience prior to starting the business.
Okay.
And I worked at large scale firms like Oracle, small tech startups in the LA area. And so I understood technology. I understood the software development lifecycle. And then I didn't know about Salesforce either, and didn't think about even working at nonprofits because I was in tech firm space. But I actually found a job at the Broad Center, which is a philanthropy organization, as a technology specialist there to manage their technology solutions. That's where I learned about Salesforce and the power of the platform. And I fell in love with it. And I saw that there was a need for technology experience and expertise for consultants working for nonprofits and that understand technology, that understand nonprofits, and can kind of bring those two things together. And so I took the opportunity. I started as an independent consultant, thinking that I might just work for another firm or work independently. And 5 years later, we have a team of 10 and we're growing, and it's exciting.
So I bet in your space, you're probably like the Lone Ranger, because there's not a lot of people that think about, CRM's like the 4-letter word in the sales organization, but it's really important to have a CRM. So, nonprofits, people don't think often as a business. They think it's kind of like you're just doing wishy-washy stuff helping the world, but
Right.
It's very much a business. So would you say the use of Salesforce is similar to working in the sales organization, or in fact actually deeper?
I think it's deeper. I would say it's deeper because Salesforce definitely is more thought of as a sales platform for sales teams. And that is what it was created for, but I think it's evolved, and people don't know that. And people don't know that it's evolved to do more, and it's highly customizable. So Salesforce.org was a whole different entity, and now they're with Salesforce under the Salesforce.com umbrella as well. But as time has progressed, Salesforce has invested in solutions specifically for nonprofits. So initially, they wanted to extend the platform to nonprofits to provide nonprofits a way to have robust technology solutions. But once they started seeing that there was a business there and there was opportunity there for nonprofits, they started developing products specific for nonprofits and foundations. And then they just started opening up this whole ecosystem of consultants. So that's why there's a .org partnership that's separate from the .com partnership. And it's just been growing rapidly. I mean, there's a lot of business, and I think there is a misconception that it's not a good business or it's not as fruitful, but there is a need there as well.
Yeah, the thing about nonprofit, I mean, if you think about mission for a business, I mean, mission's very visible in nonprofit. Like, if there's no mission, there is no nonprofit for the most part. And just to make sure my mission of making sure the audience is involved, I'd like to involve them in the show to make sure their comments are seen. We got Rosalind Krieger out there in Canada, representing for Team Live. Thanks, Rosalind, for jumping in here.
Thanks.
We had Chris Jones for Team Bowtie. He's one of my Bowtie guys. Thanks, Chris, for jumping in here. And then Shara Ruffin, she's a very insightful information. I need to get to school somebody right now. So Rosalind said, I don't know what Salesforce is, but I'm about to learn about it. So thank you. So Salesforce is probably almost the Kleenex, I think, of CRMs. Would you agree with that? It's kind of the Kleenex of CRM?
Yeah, definitely. It's a customer relationship management solution. And so it was designed to help people manage their relationships with people, with their constituents, people and organizations. And so it's evolved. So I don't really see it as just a customer relationship management solution. I see it as a database. I see it as a robust technology solution that can manage donations, that can manage memberships, that can manage volunteers, that can manage grant giving and processes for grant philanthropy, grant making philanthropies. And so it's extremely powerful. And if you think about anything that you do operationally in Excel, or if you're using other tools, Salesforce can do it. And the power of using Salesforce is that it's a single source of truth, right? So if you have systems that you leverage and they're disjointed, they're not talking to each other, that's a problem, especially nowadays. We're in a pandemic. People are not sitting next to each other. You can't tap somebody on the shoulder to get the information you need. And so it's more important now to have one system that has that transparency that we call a single source of truth, that can give you proper representation of what's going on in the organization, that can help and empower you to get your job done. And that is what Salesforce does.
This is a moment of contention with the CRMs, because a lot of salespeople, there's a love-hate relationship with CRM. So I've been on both sides of the fence, where started as a salesperson by myself, didn't have a team. So CRM to me was like, what do I got to do that for? I got everything in my head. And then as a leader now, I'm like, oh, we need the CRM because I'll forget something in a quick second. So talk to people why a CRM is important just in general, because some people are on here, they're lone rangers, they don't have a team. But why is a CRM important just in general in the sales process?
So for sales process, I mean, we deal with this ourselves. We have Salesforce, and we primarily started using it for the purpose of sales. And, we were a small team. And so similarly, we had the same challenge. Do we spend the time? We don't really have the time. I have it all in my head, or, it's not as efficient when you're having a small team. But if you're thinking about growth and you're thinking about, there's only so much you can do. You're thinking about knowledge transfer. You're thinking about really helping to support your clients in the most effective way. I mean, let's just be real. There's only so much that we can retain in our brain and remember. And so you're doing yourself a disservice. You're doing your clients a disservice by not tracking the information. If you want to grow as a person, as an organization, you need to monitor and track data. You can't do that without tracking your data. And you can't track your data properly without a CRM. And so we've made it a practice, because we want to grow. We have goals and we want to work towards something. We've made it a practice internally to log everything, to track everything, to provide that transparency across the team, to remember what's that conversation that we had 3 months ago with the client. Because with nonprofits and philanthropy organizations, the sales cycle is long. So depending on what your sales cycles are, you want to remember who you talked to. We had one organization we were engaged with Catholic Charities.
Mm-hmm.
We were engaged with them. We talked to them. Somehow they dropped off. About 6 months later, they came back, but it was a different contact person. I needed to remember the name of the person that I spoke with 6 months ago in the context of our conversation, so that I can come back and revisit this and sound like I know what I'm talking about. But let's be real, I'm not going to remember conversations I had 6 months ago. So the CRM, I pulled it up. I had all of our notes there, and it was very helpful to re-engage with the client.
Yeah, that's where I find the value, because I mean, there's this point when you're a solo salesperson or solo, whatever you're doing, consultant, that you do rely on your brain. Like it's that personal touch. People make it feel like, oh, this is me. I know everything. It's my customers. But I feel like there's like a bravadous about that people just don't want to say they got to rely on a computer. They just want to, be like, I'm the person. So when you're working with nonprofits, it's very much like I said, mission's very big for that. So is it hard for you to kind of get the message across to a nonprofit that you need this?
Yes and no. I think people are becoming more and more aware of the need. But sure, I mean, we have people who, job security or whatever, they have an emotional attachment to the way that they do things. And I feel like that probably that's present in every single type of company, but it's probably more present in nonprofits and philanthropy organizations because, to date, they've been a little bit more behind the times in technology. And so that does come with some of that culture. They're not revenue driven, right? They're mission driven, as you said. And so they're not tied to revenue numbers and number of sales calls. They're just not tied to those. So it's a little different emotional aspect. And that's where change management comes in, of really having the conversation of helping them understand that you could be more efficient. Nonprofits, I forget the number, but there's so many, there's so much dollars spent on administrative tasks that you're able to replace that with a solution and be more efficient, have more transparency around your donations and the mission-driven work and impact that you're making, then nobody wants to be just logging data and doing administrative tasks. If you're working at a nonprofit, you want to do the mission-driven work. So we try to pitch it in a way that's going to help motivate them to just understand that we want to take away these tasks from you so that you can take a step back and do the mission-driven work that you're there. And that there's other opportunities for you to engage with the organization. We want to help you through that so that you're not stuck on those administrative tasks. But also from an executive level, we try to paint the picture around you're spending all this money on administrative tasks when if you make this investment on technology, sure, it's not a cheap investment, but over time, then you're opening up revenue that you can be putting towards the mission instead of towards administrative costs. So it's a long-term play, but it certainly is impactful.
Yeah, and I think when you mentioned the investment piece that people don't realize about that, those administrative tasks are salary or billable hours. So yes, you might drop some coin on it, but at the end of the day, you're replacing a human that's doing nonsense tasks. And when I think about you said that a powerful thing, they get back to the mission-driven movement, like do the thing you were there to do versus logging data. So we had a comment real quick actually that Rosalind said, Daisy, I'm sold what growth comes to need for a CRM. And I agree with that because, like I said, when you have a few customers, you can deal with it. But when you start having like multiple people, it is a disservice because you're just playing catch up all the time.
Yeah.
So for the nonprofit space, you mentioned there's a CRM is one part of this, but you're not just the CRM. So when you're helping them, you're implementing obviously Salesforce to get enforced with them. But what is the challenge? Like, is it usually the mindset shift? Is that the biggest thing you're working on with nonprofits to get used to doing this new task?
Yeah, there's definitely lots of change management pieces, and every culture is different. Like I said, a lot of them don't have an on-site tech team. You work at these big companies and you go in and you have an IT person, you have an HR person, there's like these formal roles. Well, in nonprofits, you don't have that. You have people who work there because they want to do the work and they're passionate about the mission. And then they could do some operation stuff, so they do that. But guess what? They're also doing technology potentially, or trying to fill in the gaps. And they're also doing, donor management and those kinds of roles. And so they wear different hats. And it's just about really helping understand what they do and respecting that there is a lot of work involved that they do, and just unpacking that and helping to paint the picture and show them. We do a lot of prototyping. And so we say, let me show you what the system, because I think there's a gap, right? Of just like how they can't envision how it's supposed to work. And so we do try to show them as part of that change management. And every client is different. So I think in what we do, we try to understand the culture, the people that we're working with, and then really try to approach our change management piece around Salesforce CRM implementation with that in mind, to be sensitive to that.
I want to ask the audience something real quick. Do me a favor, guys, and comment if you use a CRM, what it is, and if you don't use a CRM, why you don't. So comment if you use a CRM, which one it is. You got Pipedrive, you got Salesforce, you got all these different places, or if you use a spreadsheet, that's kind of a CRM. That's one thing. But Lamarcus had a good comment real quick. He said, very useful. Go ahead.
That's a great comment. No, let's read it.
Yeah, a very useful platform we understand for an enterprise organization that is needed as a pillar. As far as startup and or growing businesses, when is the best time to make that investment?
So I consider myself more of a startup and a growing business. And I've been using Salesforce since we started. And so granted, we started using it mainly for sales, and we had 2 of our team members in the system. And now this year, we've got all of our 10 team members in the system, and we're using it for project management and other things to just bring everything in one system. So I think it really depends on how much you want to grow. And so what we've decided to do internally is we're using this traction model, and we have a 10-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 1-year plan. And previously we've grown the business as we get the business. But now we're using the opposite model where we grow the business and we invest in the business to get the business. And so that means that we have to invest in people and we have to invest in technology so that we're ready for that growth. And so I would say, to the extent that what's your vision and what's your 1-year goal, what's your 3-year goal, what's your 10-year goal, and how are you going to get there? And investing in those tools, investing in the people that is needed is when you need to do that. And so, I think that's it in a nutshell. I mean, you got to really understand that and put the effort in it, and it will be beneficial. I think
so. Even like a startup, so basically you're saying even for a startup, no matter where you are, it's kind of a good tool just to kind of streamline and scale the process because you have an actual, like you mentioned, one source of truth.
Yes. And the one thing that I'll add to that as a caveat, right, is just to throw a curveball in it, is you have to be able to know what your process is. And so you don't really want to invest and play within a CRM unless you're able to do it on paper. So we do recommend that for our clients as well. So someone mentioned their sticky notes.
Yep.
That's to start. I mean, you establish your process in your sticky notes. You use Excel. You figure out what works, and then you put it in your CRM. And so to that extent too, there's some work on that side that needs to be done in order for you to have a successful implementation of a CRM solution, because it's costly. It is. It's costly from a money standpoint of licenses, but also from your time to set it up and to manage and maintain it. And so you want to make sure that you have, they don't have to be solid, but somewhat of a process in place that you've figured out that you can then work that in.
Well, I think that's the key thing for it. You're not saying it's all high tech. I mean, you still have some low tech with it, because I find myself writing on stuff, but I move it in later. I think that's the key thing that you mentioned. That's super powerful to have a process, because that's where I think maybe sales does this, but even nonprofits do this. It's just like we got the business, but we don't know how we got it.
Right.
So is that the first step you think when you're thinking about, when you mention a startup, before you even get to CRM? Because I think people make this mistake. They get a CRM and don't have a process. So would you say the first step is figure out what we do and then get to the CRM?
Yeah. I mean, the way that we kind of tier it is people, process, technology. You have to have the right people in place in your organization. And then with the right people doing in the right seats, then you establish a process, because the people establish a process. And then when you have your process, then you bring technology in there. If you do it that way and do it in that order, then it's more successful.
We had some comments on to make sure I get on here. We had Mr. D.V. Logan, representing for Chicago. He actually is working with some nonprofits, so he'll probably have some questions coming up here too, he mentioned. He actually said, good to see everyone here. I'm helping a nonprofit grow their corporate organizational structure and enter a new phase, including having their own building and gallery. So he's in the growth phase. So in that situation, before he contacts you, let's break that down. Somebody can contact you and not have a process and probably get some help in that area, right?
Yes. I think we also work with organizations who help nonprofits and for-profit companies, but since we are primarily nonprofits, establish their processes. If they don't have processes, or if they're growing and they need to kind of help establishing that plan, then they come in and they help with that, and they help them evaluate technology solutions. So we usually recommend that. Unless you have somebody internal, but certainly, if they're purchasing their building and having a gallery, there's lots of logistics involved, operations involved, there's inventory involved. And so you want to make sure you have a system that tracks that and manages that. And Salesforce can do that too, surprisingly. But yes, they can manage inventory, they can manage processes to help that operational piece.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because I think it's where people think, with all this technology out there, you said it's the third step. It's people, process, and then technology. I think it's important to understand that the CRM doesn't replace the process, but people are always going to think that, oh, if I get a CRM, everything happens. You still have to know, what phase am I in? What am I doing right now? So in the nonprofit space, obviously there's this, I'm taking care of things, and it's still a business though. So what are there some metrics you could share, some kind of results you've seen, like when a nonprofit puts in the CRM after a year this happens? Do you have any general stats like that you could share?
Say that again, a nonprofit. Can you give me that example again?
Like some general stats of, like, after they put in a CRM process-oriented kind of mindset, their donations went to this, or their work went to this, like any kind of a ROI they can expect or just consider.
Yeah, we sometimes do that. I don't have anything top of mind. I know that one organization, a lot of people look at logins, right? And
okay.
So, I think prior, we moved them actually from one CRM to another CRM, and their logins per day increased from about, I think it was 70% to about 85%. So it increased because the enhancements, and it was a better solution for them. So I think that it is important to be thoughtful in what you build, which is why the process and the people before are so important. Other than that, like I said, I don't have too many stats off the top of my mind, but I think just from the perspective of what we tend to do is we get organizations who are working what we call federated systems, and so they don't talk to each other. Okay. And so they spend a lot of time creating reports, and I don't remember exactly how much time, but let's just say they're preparing for a board review, and it would take them literally weeks potentially to pull all the data together, to put it in a board book. And when we were done with the implementation, it's a click of a button. All the data is there, everything's in one place, because they don't have to sift through multiple resources. So things like that, from an efficiency standpoint, dashboards, if everything's in one place, it's literally a click of a button for tracking your KPIs and the things that you care about, versus having to export from one source, export from another source, and then merge that data together, and then do some manipulating of
calculation,
formulas and all of that stuff. That is just unnecessary. So just think about how much time that might save you. That's stuff that's just baked in to the platform, or that we can build for efficiency.
That brings an interesting comment then from Jennifer Orkin, a good friend of mine. She said, my 2 cents, rapid deployment and test with users and back to the drawing board to finalize the design before the big expensive CRM. The users need to touch and test first on the low tech model. So like you mentioned, writing it on paper and having something to see. Yeah, because you got to see the CRM, you got to be able to visualize it.
I think, and even to further on Jennifer's comment, is even beyond the paper base, when you were actually building it, because sometimes, and technology has this funny way of just, when you see it, you're like, oh, I didn't think about this, or no, now that I see it, I want this. And so we work with an agile methodology, which means it's iterative. So just like Jennifer said, we will build something low tech. We will build something as an MVP, which is minimal viable product. We're going to show it to you, let you potentially play with it, and then get your feedback, and then continue building until we get it right. And so that does prove to be very efficient and very effective. Sometimes it's hard culturally for organizations to adopt that iterative approach, because they get nervous if it's not perfect and the end result. But it's our job to kind of walk them through the benefit and the value of doing it that way.
Well, like that's customizable, because the worst is, I've been in a sales organization where you get a CRM and it's already done. and you're like, what about this? What about that? And there was no consultation with the sales team to ask, what would you like to have in there? Which I think people think that the CRM is done from the CEO level only, but really it needs to involve the frontline people that will use it, just to make sure they know what's going on. And we had a comment real quick. I can't see the name, but my husband and I are starting our outreach ministry. This is right on time. I can't see who that is, but you get the privacy settings on your LinkedIn, so I can't see who that is. We'll check it out later.
Churches and ministries use Salesforce, and so that is a great use case for building a platform. So I completely agree. I also want to just address the word custom. I do use it loosely, but sometimes that is a scary word, right? Wait, custom, I don't really want custom because then I'm going to have to maintain it. So I do want to clarify that you can build a lot of custom meaning like it works for you. We need to listen to what you do and we tailor it to your needs. But most of how we build things in Salesforce is not through custom code, right? It's not like a technology solution that you have to code everything, which is very costly and hard to maintain. Salesforce has a setup administrative interface that allows you to develop things and customize things with clicks versus code. And so it's a very configurable. So we customize through configuration mostly. So that helps that, your investment of a licensed product to be easier to maintain and to be scalable, and it's more flexible to grow with it.
Perfect. And I'll make sure, Monique Davis, that was your comment, Monique. I couldn't see for some reason on there. And then we had Noelle Hilton over here. She had a comment as well. I want to put on screen if I could find her. It's a long one, though. We have a tech roadmap on our internal and external strategies that are continuously fine-tuning our business process. I think many nonprofits don't have technical resources in-house to manage. I was hired 2 years ago, but for many nonprofits, the funding isn't there. There are great pro bono services out there too, like Catch a Fire, that can help with internal resources that aren't available. So how do you deal with that when there's a nonprofit that doesn't have the resources? Do you have any kind of consultation work you do?
I completely agree. We do. We have a little HR staffing where they can hire temporary resources to fill the gap, or what we call VCTO if they're going through an implementation and they don't need to hire a seat because, sometimes it's harder for them also to get approval for hiring a full-time resource than it would be to hire a temporary consultant. And so we do try to help fill that gap. But you're right, in some cases there's budget constraints. But I think that nonprofits are starting to realize more and more that they need to invest in technology. And so I think that what I've seen is that they're putting budget aside and identifying that or planning for including it in the budget for those technology resources and for capacity building. And furthermore, because we work with a lot of foundations too, and so I'm also in that kind of world. Furthermore, foundations are realizing there's a need for nonprofits to have technology. So previously there's been grants for capacity building. Now they're starting to talk about more specific technology grants. So capacity building is kind of broad where sometimes technology gets baked in there, but now there's funding that is available and starting to become more available specifically to support nonprofits with technology builds because they realize that for them it's important, and for the nonprofits that they support it's important as well. So I think this is changing, which is great for me. I'm happy about that.
Well, it's important. This was fourth quarter, so I mean, businesses are in planning mode. So if you work at a nonprofit and you're going through kind of change, right now is the time to think about these budget things. Just because we're going to do a quick little 30-second intermission, but we're going to talk about COVID-19 with CRM. So we get 30-second video. Hang on 1 second.
Thanks.
I had a goof on that. I just realized I'm a one-man show. That's Monterius Rush. That's not Preston. Monterius Rush, that was his picture for the Bowtie Nation. I'm a one-man show. I messed up on the text there. I just realized. Monterius, don't fight me. He's part of the Bowtie Nation. Check out his profile. He's a graduate with an MBA. Thought I'd shout him out for the Bowtie Nation. But I was thinking about something with COVID. Before you and I got on the camera, we was talking about the tapping on the shoulder. Hey, what's going on with that deal? You could do that back then. Now you're in California. California is actually having some spikes in COVID right now. New York's having some spikes again. It's kind of, we're not leaving the virus. It's still very much here. So in this new social distance, remote working era, how much more important has the CRM become now because of that?
Incredibly more important. I mean, we're seeing nonprofits who were planning this in their next year's budget or their 2 to 3 year plan now prioritize it in their now plan, because like I said, you can't tap somebody on the shoulder to get the data, or just walk up to somebody and just ask them to pull a report on whatever you need. And so having everything in one system and having it available and transparent across the organization is extremely important now more than ever, so that you can do your day-to-day job, so that you're empowering your employees to do their day-to-day job, because you don't have file cabinets anymore, and you don't have that luxury anymore. And so I think people are realizing more and more that even though this is somewhat temporary in regards to, I'm sure one day we'll probably get back to get in the office, but it's going to have a long-term impact, and it puts more of awareness and an alert to backup plans, right? Like, things can happen, and we've relied on this one system of being in person for so long that we can't rely on that anymore. And it's impacted businesses, it's impacted nonprofits in the mission work to the extent that they've had to scramble to do solutions, and they've realized that they're not set up for that rapid change in digital transformation. There's a digital transformation gap. And so I think that more and more this has brought awareness to make this a priority and make this something that they invest in.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest totally that, before COVID, I was, CRM was important, but it wasn't like living and breathing for me. Like, it was there, but it wasn't like a consistent. It would be like maybe like every other week I'd look at it, to be fully candid. It wasn't like a constant thing. But now it's like I have to go every other day at least. Like, if it's not daily, I have to go at least every other day to kind of see, okay, which account did this, what's going on with that. And it's just because of the fact that the nature is people forget things. Now, like you mentioned, you don't have the drive time. Driving was my release for stuff sometimes, just to kind of let my head get stuff out. Now it's just walk downstairs and get to work. So I don't have that gap of time to download. So I have to start jotting notes down and put this in the CRM for that to keep track of it. So as we get into this new era, I mean, like you mentioned, that people are speeding up the budget for things of that nature. What is the typical size nonprofit you work with, just so people get an idea who to introduce you to?
Yeah, so we kind of think about size as in revenue.
Okay.
And so we do work with, we tend to work with nonprofits who tend to have 2 million or more in revenue, but 2 million being really limited budget for a Salesforce implementation. So ideally, it would be revenues of 10 million or more, and that they have a budget, or they've spent budget of $100,000 or more in capacity building or administrative things. Because if they don't have that, then they probably don't have budget for a Salesforce implementation. And so it probably isn't going to make sense for them at this point in time.
Well, let's unpack that real quick, because I think when people think of nonprofit and revenue, they don't usually put those two things together. They're like, right. It's a nonprofit, how does it have revenue? So for people that aren't familiar with that world, because I'm pretty familiar, but for people that aren't familiar, that maybe want to work with nonprofits that say, hey, what's the budget? What does revenue mean in the nonprofit space for people that aren't familiar with that?
Well, nonprofits can make money. So nonprofits do make money. So it means the same thing. They can collect money for certain, they have membership models. They solicit donations. They get grant funding. So all of that is considered revenue, and they use that funding for, and I'm no expert in, accounting and how the money is distributed, but, they do track that. And so there's, just like any other organization, there's accounts receivable, there's the finance team, there's legal teams, and there is thought and consideration for events that they do and what money is collected at those events, they certainly have to use my understanding, and this is where I'm not 100%, is that they have to, in order to be considered a nonprofit, they have to use a highest percentage of that revenue dollars on, employees. So
Admin, employees, yeah.
and the mission, like what their mission is driving. And so if it's driving, environmentally friendly initiatives, it should be towards those initiatives. But whatever their initiatives are, they have to be driven towards that.
Yeah, I just wanted to help dispel that. I feel like on LinkedIn, there's a lot of salespeople. So a lot of them might think, oh, I don't work with the nonprofits. I want the big guys, which is the same thing. It's just there's this mindset that people have, I think. Yeah. And Noelle's actually at a nonprofit. She put a comment, absolutely, the org has to be data-driven. So definitely got to focus on data from her opinion. And then Ruby also mentioned, my data has increased way more. I'm constantly researching something. And that's good for your space, Daisy. I mean, because before people probably would ignore, I don't need a CRM, but now you're seeing the fruits of your labor. So for the salesperson, let's just to make sure to bring that home for them. What is the benefit or something of a salesperson? You mentioned for their organization, you spend less time on these tasks that don't help the mission. Does that apply also for the salesperson?
Yes, I would say so. So for the salesperson that's not at a nonprofit, is that?
Well, let's say they're at a nonprofit. They're supposed to collect donations and drive membership up, and their manager's hounding them like, you didn't put it in a CRM. That battle. So how does it help the individual end user for them?
Yeah, so I think that, again, the transparency for them to manage their day-to-day, like, for example, for donor management, let's say we're talking about major gifts and you work with organizations to get large gifts, but somebody else in your organization works with them, someone there on a volunteer level, and they just had a conversation with them last week. You don't know about that conversation because you're not in the office together, or because of whatever other logistical reasons. So all of that data being brought in on that record, then when the salesperson is reaching out to them, they have access to that information because it's shared. Because in theory, the volunteer person should have added a comment that they had a conversation with them a week ago and giving a summary of the conversation. That's what the intent of the CRM. So from a practical standpoint, it really helps to elevate to the salesperson's role. But also if you're data-driven and you have to report on your goals, then the reporting is super important. So if you don't get that data in and you can't report to your executive team as to how many donations or there's so many data points that you have to, like they said, you have to report on from an accounting standpoint from a nonprofit. It's way more intense than for a profit. And so that's extremely important for a salesperson, as well as being able to meet the needs of the board, because there's board members and you have to answer board members. And then you also, if you're getting grant funding, then you also have to, there's certain requirements that you have to meet. And especially now there's a lot of CARES funding that is being distributed. They're very particular about how that money is spent and when that money is spent. And so you have to track the data. And for anyone who's, working on the day-to-day and inputting that information, you're going to be responsible for making sure that that is in there, because that defines the success of that funding for your organization, which is supporting your seat at that organization. So
your paycheck too, yeah. I think you have your work cut out for you for legacy organizations. So probably startups are probably easier because the startups don't have the bad habits of we never had a CRM before, we never had to do this, which brings an interesting comment from DV Logan. He said, digital transformation gap. What kinds of technology do we need to work on and get out of the workplace? We'll do that question first because he has two. So what kind of technology do we need to work on and get out into the workplace for that digital transformation gap?
I think I think I understand your question. What kind of technology do we need to work on? So I think that there's technology that exists already. So I don't think that and I hope I'm interpreting your question.
Well, let's expand it more. He put up, I find a lot of people focus a lot on apps and network connections. And while great to have for travel, connections can drop and apps may not work. So I guess he's saying, what do you see as the place of high quality digital and cinematic photography, photo videography in the regular and virtual workspace? So I guess he's kind of combining two things. If you're trying to make a gap of maybe I know he's working with a film studio. If it's a low tech film studio and they want to have this gap where now we're using technology more, what are some basic things they can do to kind of get used to this new digital world that's not app focused, but actually is software driven?
Yeah, I don't know that I can really answer that entirely. I know that there is, the whole CRM kind of baseline model is this, again, the single source of truth. And so you talk about apps, you talk about social, those systems don't talk to each other. And then that becomes a problem because then it's frustrating, right? We'll have to copy and paste and do it here and then download it. And especially videography, there's, those files are large. And so I would start to think about things more so how can we put it in one system that can start, and which is usually a CRM, right? You store your videos, and Salesforce, they have an app store. And so this is, just like your iPhone has an app store, then you're able to go to the app store and download functionality or apps onto your Salesforce platform, just like you do with your phone. And that gives you added functionality. And so this elevates the single system of record. So you want to make sure that everything plays well with the CRM that you're choosing. So I'm biased to Salesforce. So in this case, Salesforce. So there's a lot of development companies who are building products around videography, around data storage, to really help solve these solutions so that it comes into one place where I know that we spoke with an LMS portal build where you can log into the portal. If you want to do a webinar, it's already integrated with Zoom. You click there, it records your video, it stores the video right there in the Zoom where you can then share it to your students immediately. You don't have this upload, download, disjointed system situation happening. And so I would just think through really understanding what your needs are and what your pain points are with your current solutions. And then talk to an expert, a consulting partner, or as I mentioned, there's other partners who really help to unpack these conversations, who have experience with things that can help you evaluate solutions that are going to meet your needs.
Yeah, and I think to add to that too, when you think about that gap, I think kind of knowing, like Daisy was saying, something that will integrate everything. I think the problem might be if you want to make a jump in the digital space, you might just get one tool and not evaluate, does it work with other things? So in the video space, you definitely want to make sure, if I get this one thing, is that it, or is it going to have add-ons, which I like that Salesforce has add-ons for it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I always think about what's your overall vision, right? What are we trying to do as an organization? I often see so many people, to your point, I just need to be able to record videos. So they just go into these silos and make these decisions without thinking about the bigger picture. And so it is important to, even though you're not going to really build out everything at one time, understanding the big picture and where you're going is extremely important in those decisions.
Yeah, and at least a company that can possibly be agile and change with that. Oh, and he added something else to it. Yeah. He added a SaaS, customer resource models, integration of solutions. Thanks for the insight. So yeah, I think we kind of cover that. Just make sure whatever you get is not just packaged for one thing. I mean, you can see now LinkedIn's added Zoom into it just to have a Zoom call in there. So they're even thinking about integrating other tools. So I guess make sure whatever company, if you're going digital, that SaaS resource does have more than just what they're giving you.
That's correct. Yeah. And
last thing before we get out of here, Ruby said, I think security has to get better with keeping our stored information safe, protection of our websites and other cloud-based security and info, that is, especially if we've been sharing personal patient information over the internet way more now. So that's probably important for your space because, when you're dealing with donations, people don't want that out there publicly and all that. So has that been a piece for you that it gives more security for these nonprofits for the work they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, again, we also work with philanthropy organizations and they're very private about their data. And so it is super important. And that kind of lends to more of a point to choose a popular CRM or SaaS solution that is a licensed product. It's an enterprise licensed product because they essentially they deal with the security elements. They make sure that their product is HIPAA compliant. you're not storing information or data on a random server if you're building everything custom. And so those things have been already baked into the platform, but they continue to be conversations to make sure that, Salesforce is really mindful of the security and know, they'll get in big trouble clearly, and it's a large enterprise product. So it is a really important piece. I think internally as consultants, we also have been having more conversations around security. I mean, obviously we have our contracts, but when we download and when we're migrating data, how do we do that? We don't do that on our computers. Maybe we have servers, or we really have that conversation to make sure we're protecting the data of our clients. So it is a great point.
Awesome. Well, Daisy, I appreciate this for being a client of mine and then having a deeper dive with you. I've looked at the website a little bit, but it's different than a conversation with the founder of the company. So if people want to find out more about ImagineCRM, what should they do, or how should they do it?
Our website is ImagineCRM.org. You can also email me at daisy@ImagineCRM.org. But we have a contact form on our website, and we'd love to hear from you and comments, or if you have any questions and want to chat a little bit more specifically about your use cases or needs, I'm happy to do that. Thank you so much for your time. This was fun.
I like to have fun. That's what the bow tie nation likes to have fun here. But my last political plug, we all stayed up late watching the debate last night. So please, if you have not voted, make sure you go vote.
Make sure the eye roll. Yes, vote. Yes.
Vote. My wife and I and the kids, we went last week like 6 a.m. So go whenever you can go. I think everywhere pretty much is open for early voting now. So I think, actually Arkansas, I think, starts Monday, or Alaska, one of them. But wherever you are, please go try to vote and tell someone that hasn't voted yet to go do so. We will catch you guys next time on Business with Benefits. Please be safe. Please wear a mask, wash your hands, all that good stuff. And we will see you next time.
Bye.